We are closing out our series in Joshua today. We've been in the book of Joshua. And I wanted to start by sharing some surprising facts. Facts that don't sound real, but they are real. You might have heard some of these before, but some of them are new to me. So did you know, surprising fact, did you know that there are more stars in the universe than sand on all the beaches in the entire world? Isn't that crazy? More stars in the universe than all. I look at my kid's sandbox and I'm like, that sounds wrong. Like, that's a lot of sand. Like, what, really? But evidently, and I don't know who counts. That's the only thing I would say. It seems like they could be lying, but me and you would never know. So, surprising truth there. Here's another one. A day on Venus is longer than a year on Venus. A day on Venus, and you're like, wait, that hurts my brain. Here's what this means, that the planet rotates slower than it orbits. So it can orbit all the way around the sun, and it's only orbited less than one time. Also, fun fact, on Earth, that's called Monday. That's how long Monday is sometimes. Here's another one. Humans and giraffes have the same amount of bones in their neck. That's weird, but evidently true, even though giraffes have 8-foot-high necks. Another one, octopuses have 3 hearts and blue blood. Isn't that weird? Sounds like a sci-fi movie, doesn't it? Like those are actual aliens that are in the ocean somehow. Another one, clouds can weigh over 1 million pounds, which is just crazy because they're floating in the sky. You talk about light as a cloud. Actually, clouds are heavy. Water's heavy. They're made of water. There you go. And then my favorite, a snail can sleep for 3 years. 3 years. Isn't that nuts? Do you remember in elementary school, you used to have that conversation like, what animal would you want to be? And everybody's like, cheetah, I want to be able to run fast. Bird, I want to be able to fly. Dolphin, I want to like jump through the ocean. I would like to submit snail. Like, have you ever thought that you would say, actually, the animal I want to be is a snail? Because I know, as a parent, a 3-year nap kind of sounds nice. Surprising truths. Surprising. So today, what I want to talk to you about is a surprising truth about you. A surprising truth about you. When you first hear it, it's going to be kind of like those things I just said. You're like, I don't know. Sounds weird. You might want to kind of internally argue with it, but I think as we talk, you'll hopefully see the truth of it, because unlike the little surprising truths I just gave you, this one about you matters a lot. Doesn't really matter to you how many hearts an octopus has. That's not going to change your life. But the surprising truth you're going to learn about yourself really, really matters to your life. Now, the reason it's surprising, this truth, you might, when you first hear it, you might not like it. You might automatically kind of want to push away from it. It's not the best truth at first. You might kind of wish it wasn't true, but then once you realize the reason for it, hopefully you'll be a little more drawn to it. And then the second reason it's surprising, have you ever heard the corny joke? Maybe it's not a joke because first service didn't laugh at this at all. Where the older fish is swimming by the 2 younger fish, and the older fish says, "How's the water, boys?" And then they keep swimming, and then the younger fish turns to his buddy and says, "What the heck is water?" All right, it's not a joke. It's just a thing that I'll tell you. So it's supposed to be funny. It does take your brain a minute to catch up with it, because the idea is he's in water and he doesn't even know it. He's been in water his entire life and doesn't know it. And it kind of speaks to this idea that we have these invisible realities that we are so immersed in that we fail to notice them. And that's what this truth is going to kind of be like, because you've lived it your whole life. You might not even be aware of it because you're so used to it. So we've been in the story of Joshua. And we've seen God move in Joshua's life and the life of the Israelite people while Joshua's been around, just in absolutely spectacular and miraculous ways, right? God parted the Jordan River and they walked across on dry land. God knocked down the walls of Jericho. God threw hailstones at the enemy and helped them win a battle. God stopped the sun in the sky in the middle of the day. Like, God has done miraculous things all throughout Joshua's life. And that's just the book of Joshua. Joshua was alive before the book of Joshua. Joshua experienced all the miracles in Exodus as well. So Joshua has just experienced God on like a whole nother level throughout his life. And here we're going to come to the end of the story. It's Joshua chapter 24, where Joshua kind of gives a farewell speech to the people of Israel. He knows he's about to die, so he gives a speech. It's kind of a thing that happens in the Old Testament a lot with the great leaders of Israel. Now, it's the whole chapter is the speech. We're not going to look at the whole chapter. Actually, we're just going to look at one verse in there. So the essence of the speech is he's trying to remind the people of Israel how much God has done for them. And it's this idea, hey, don't forget how far God has brought us. Don't forget all these miracles and all these things that God has done all through our life. An important thing for Israel, an important thing for us. So Joshua spends a ton of time trying to remind them of that. And then he comes to a place in his speech where he asks the people of Israel a question. He wants them to make a choice. It's an important choice. Maybe the most important choice they'll ever make, and maybe the most important choice we will ever make. And it's just one verse we're going to look at. This verse also contains, I want to say, one of the most famous sentences in the Bible. It's up there. And it's kind of surprising because Joshua isn't like an A-list Bible character. I don't know if you've ever thought about that, but Joshua's not A-list. Like you got David, you got Moses, Paul, those are like the big ones. But Joshua's kind of second tier. But this sentence that he says in this verse is actually absolutely top 10 most famous verses in the Bible, even though we ignore most of the verse. So here's what he says, Joshua chapter 24, verse 15. But if you refuse to serve the Lord, then choose today whom you will serve. Would you prefer the gods your ancestors served beyond the Euphrates? Or will it be the gods of the Amorites in whose land you live now? But as for me and my family, we will serve the Lord. So there it is. I don't know if you grew up as a Christian, you probably have heard that sentence. For me, it was the King James Version. The King James Version was, as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. Does anybody have artwork with that on it? My parents do, somewhere in their house somewhere. I know it because I grew up there. I've read it all the time. It's a Bible verse. So Joshua, right there at the end, makes a statement, right? That's the reason it's famous is because it's not just a statement, right? It's a commitment, it's a declaration. It's kind of what we just experienced up here with these families. They're saying, hey, as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. Don't know what y'all gonna do, but this is what we're gonna do. That's what Joshua is saying, and he put that choice to them. But so I want to look at that declaration, but before we look at the declaration, we got to look at the choice. And before we look at the choice, Joshua actually makes an assumption about the people of Israel before he gives them the choice and before he makes the declaration. And it's the assumption that I really want to zoom in on. Because the assumption that Joshua makes about the people of Israel is also an assumption I want to make about us, and it's actually the surprising truth that I want to tell you about you. So what he did, and it's not explicit in the verse, but you can kind of see he's assuming this as he says this. Did you notice that he did not say, hey, you can choose to serve God or you can choose to not serve God? Did you notice that was not the choice he gave them? He could have said, hey, choose God or not God, but he didn't. He didn't say choose to serve or choose not to serve. He didn't say that. He specifically said, hey, you're gonna serve something. Which thing, which God, which person are you going to serve? He gives them a choice, but it wasn't the choice that we normally think it is. It wasn't the choice between God and not God. It wasn't the choice between serving and not serving. And this shows his assumption. Joshua's assumption about the people of Israel was that they would serve something or someone in their life. They would serve something or someone in their life. And he was giving them the option of which thing it would be. And I want to say to you that assumption that Joshua is making about the people of Israel is also true about you. So here's your surprising truth. You will serve something or someone in your life. You will serve something or someone in your life. It's not if, it's which thing, which person. You can't turn that off. You're going to serve, what will it be? Now, the reason I say that's surprising, if you're like me, you kind of want to reject that. I have a little bit of a rebellious streak in me, so the moment you say I'm going to serve something, I'm like, bet, no, I'm not. Like, get out of my face, right? We're Americans. The last time somebody told us we had to serve, we threw their tea in the harbor, right? Like, we shoot fireworks off every year to remind them of it too. Like, we don't mess around with this. We don't serve anybody. So the moment you tell me that I will serve something or someone in my life, I kind of want to push back against it. And I get that. If that's where you're at, I get that. But we got to dig a little bit deeper into this idea of serve. There's some other verses in the Bible, other people in the Bible who actually kind of present this same idea, and I think we can dig in and find some deeper truth here. Actually, Jesus says something similar when he was during his ministry in Matthew chapter 26 or Matthew 6 verse 24. No one can serve two masters, for you will hate one and love the other, or you'll be devoted to one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and be enslaved to money. So there's the word serve again. You see that? He said you can't serve two masters. Now Jesus is saying, hey, if you thought that you could serve two things, you're wrong. So he's like, hey, to those people who think I can serve God and this other thing. And that's a common thing that we think, that, hey, I can serve God, and then I've got this other thing that I also really care about, and it's like they're tied for first place. Jesus is like, nope, that's not the way your heart works. You can't have two first places. One's going to win. One's going to win. You're either going to be devoted to one or you're going to be devoted to the other one. You're not going to be able to do both. And what's going to happen, the way your heart works, is the moment you try to put both up there, one's going to fall off, and you're going to start to despise one, and you're going to be devoted to the other one. Something will kind of break down in your heart. So he's worried, Jesus here in this verse is worried that you're going to try and pick two first places. He's like, that's not going to work. But notice he didn't even address the idea of you saying, I'm not going to serve anything. He didn't even talk about that. He wasn't concerned that you might say, I'm not going to serve anything, because he knew that's not possible. Jesus knew, like Joshua, that you will serve something. But notice Jesus used even different words. He dug a little bit deeper. It wasn't just serve. Jesus used the word master. Jesus used the word devotion. Jesus used the word enslaved here. And again, I think they're talking about the same thing. So you could change this sentence, this surprising truth about you, to not just you will serve something, but you will be mastered by something or someone in your life. You'll be devoted to something or someone in your life. It's not going to be more than one thing, but it's not going to be less than one thing. There will be something that masters you in this life. And then Jesus isn't the only one. Joshua isn't the only one. Actually, the Apostle Paul, guy who wrote most of the New Testament, said this in Romans chapter 6, verse 16. Don't you realize that you become the slave of whatever you choose to obey? You can be a slave to sin, which leads to death, or you can choose to obey God, which leads to righteous living. So Paul here is saying the same thing Jesus was saying and the same thing Joshua was saying, except for Paul uses a little bit more of a harsh word here. He uses the word slave. Same kind of assumption built in, but he wants to make it a little bit more real. And again, it's like, man, you're going to be a slave to something? I'm going to be a slave to something in my life? It's kind of like, sounds like octopuses have three hearts. Like, no, they don't. That sounds wrong. Like, why would they have three, right? I'm not going to be a slave to something in my life. What are you talking about? Surprising. Now, here's part of why you want to reject that if you're like me, besides the fact that you might have a rebellious spirit like I do. When I say, hey, you're going to be a slave to something in your life, immediately, if you're like me, you think of other people who are obviously enslaved to something, like a drug addict, right? So you might think, oh, drug addict is somebody who's enslaved. And you can imagine what that's like, right? You know that when a drug addict starts, it's not an enslaving thing, that they start because it's fun and it's good and they choose to do it, and then all of a sudden they can't choose anymore, and that drugs actually get a hold of them. And you look at that and you go, that's not me. Or maybe you look at somebody who's an alcoholic and you're like, yeah, same kind of thing. They started off as this free thing, and then eventually alcohol kind of got a hold of them, and I can see clearly how they're enslaved to that. And then you go, I'm not like that. That's not me. So what are you talking about? And I get it. Those obvious ones are easy to look at and say, nothing like that. But just because something isn't obviously enslaving doesn't mean it's not enslaving. Just because something doesn't obviously have a hold of you doesn't mean that it doesn't have a hold of you. And the reason those two things that I gave as examples, drugs and alcohol, are so obvious is because the damage is so obvious. But what if there are things that you can be enslaved to that aren't as obvious, that the damage isn't as overt as those? Because here, again, we have these three characters in the Bible saying the same thing. Joshua, Jesus, and Paul are all saying you will be mastered by something. You will be enslaved to something. You will serve something in your life. You can't choose not to, but you can aim it. Little illustration that popped into my mind as I was thinking about this. Have you ever talked to somebody who wants to start their own business? You know, they're currently employed somewhere and they're like, I want to go out on my own, I want to start. And I love talking to those people. I love that. The entrepreneurs, the dreamers, the people who are just kind of out there and want to jump off into a new thing. I love that. I have that spirit resonates with me, and I love that. But every once in a while, I'll talk to somebody who wants to start their own business, and they give like reasons for it. Everybody always has reasons. Like, I want to do it for this, I want to do it for this. And every once in a while, I will hear the worst possible reason that you can start your own business. It's the worst possible reason. I'll talk to them, and they'll say something like, the reason I want to start my own business is because I don't want to have a boss anymore. I'm like, all right. I mean, I get it. I don't want to be told what to do. I don't want to be told how to do it. I don't want to be told when to do it. I get it. So you think you're going to go start your own business and you won't have a boss anymore. But I bet if you could talk to them, 6 months in, or if they make it a year, they probably won't. But if that's their reason, they won't make it very far. But if they make it a year, you could talk to them a year later, I bet you will find that they have discovered a horrible truth. That they thought that they were choosing boss and not boss. And when they left their one boss, they thought they weren't going to have any boss. But when they started their own business, what they discovered was they have hundreds of bosses now, but they're called customers. And now the customer is the one saying what they should do, when they should do it, and how they should do it. And instead of having one, every single person they interact with now treats them as if they are their boss. And if that was your only reason for starting a business, it would not go well for you because you would have that same feel every single day. Because when you were an employee, you only had one. And now you've got them every corner you turn. And it is a horrifying realization. I think some people have this same mentality when it comes to how they think about God. They think the choice is I either serve God or I don't. And I can either be in service to or I don't have to. And then you look at the God thing and you're like, God has a lot of rules. He's got a lot of commands. I don't know if I like all that. I don't know if I want to serve God. I don't know if I want to be obedient to God. Maybe I want to choose not God. And you think that's the choice. But what if that's not the choice? What if that's a false choice? Just I don't want to have a boss anymore. What if it's actually not that? What if when you choose not God, you're actually not choosing that? You either choose to serve God or something else will take that place in your heart. That some other thing will rise up and it will rule over you in your heart. That you will either be mastered by God or you will be mastered by something else. Something else will jump up and take that place. What if it's a false choice? You've been thinking this whole time, I can either choose God or not choose God. And what if that's not it? And again, you see it obviously when people say, I'm not going to choose God, I choose alcohol or I choose drugs. And you see those ones and you're like, yeah, that's obviously a terrible choice. But what if there's a lot of other choices that you could make that even though they're not obvious, they're just as damaging to your soul? And honestly, I want to say the drug addict and the alcoholic, they might have it better because at least theirs is obvious. At least they know what has a hold of them. Maybe it's worse for you if you don't know. Because there's lots of things that could have a hold of you. There's lots of things that you could serve in your life, right? Money could be it. You could serve money. Not near as damaging, obviously at least, but in here, it is. You could serve a career. You could serve sex. You could serve power. Maybe you're not type A. You could serve vacations or time off or the weekend or getting to sit on your couch. That could be the thing that you live for. You could serve approval or acceptance, a relationship. You could serve a sport. A sport. You choose not God and instead you choose a ball. And the ball rules over you. You could choose the way you look or how smart you are or how smart you appear to others. You could choose a political party. Don't pick that one. It's dumb. It's so dumb. You can see it though, right? You can see the people who are, right? You know that they're ruled by it. That it's not that they're just interested, like it has them. You can see it. You can see it. There are things in your life that if you choose those things to serve, they will grab a hold of you. You will serve something. And what Joshua and Jesus and Paul are all wanting you to see is that you don't have a choice to not. You will either serve God or you will serve something else. You're asking something to fill that void in your soul. You're asking something to fulfill you. And whatever that thing is that you're asking to fulfill you will control you. It has you. You don't have it. That's the insidious thing. Again, that's why I would actually say drugs and alcohol are better, because at least you know it has a hold of you. These other ones, you don't think they have a hold of you, but they do. Anything you're asking to fulfill you ultimately has a hold of you. Now, I have some reasons I believe that this is true. I believe that God created your heart. He designed it specifically to be connected to Him. Your heart was designed to be connected to God. Your heart was designed to find fulfillment in God. Your heart was designed to serve God, to obey God. It was actually designed that way. So it's got the piece and it fits together with God. But when sin happened and we were separated from God, the moment your heart detached from God, it immediately looked for something else to latch onto. Immediately. It can't live on its own. So immediately it's asking something else to fill that role that God was filling. And you can't not. The moment it detaches from God, it looks for something else. The moment it detaches from God, it's longing for something else, and it will find something. It only works right. Your heart only works right when it's attached to God as the thing you serve, you are enslaved to, you have devotion to. The first and number one place in your heart, it only works right when it's God. Everything else, it goes sideways quick. Author named Becky Pippert says this: whatever controls us is our Lord. The person who seeks power is controlled by power. The person who lives for acceptance is controlled by the people they seek to please. But one thing is certain: we do not control ourselves. We are controlled by whatever is the Lord of our life. You will be mastered by something. You will be a slave to something. You will serve something. Now, Joshua put it to him, right? There's his assumption, and then he gives them the choice. Like, choose this day who you're going to serve. And he kind of leaves it up to them. And I get it. He's trying to give them, the autonomy to make that decision. I'm a pastor, so you probably know I'm a little biased here, right? I'm not going to be like, hey, you could choose some of these things over here, or it could be God, maybe. Like, I'm gonna try and persuade you to choose God, okay? If you didn't know that was going to happen coming to church, you're an idiot, okay? Of course I'm going to. You should choose God. And let me explain why. I had a friend years ago, good friend. He's great, sharp, funny, really good communicator. Some of the best kind of friends are the ones that make you want to be better. Like, so he was a communicator, I was a communicator. He made me want to be better, and I really appreciated that about him. He was also an addict. High functioning. So when you imagine addict, don't imagine ended up in the gutter and had to go pull him out. That was actually never the case with him. He could function really well. Now, it would occasionally destroy a really important relationship, but he wasn't in the gutter. It caused him to lie all the time. I actually, even looking back on the relationship, and we were friends for years. As I look back, I don't know what was true and what wasn't. Like, that's how bad it was. I don't know if anything was true or if some of it was. Like, I don't know. And I don't know if you've ever had an addict in your life before. I don't know about you, but for me, like, the addiction's one thing, and it's certainly damaging, but the lying for me is worse. The lying for me was the worst part of it. It just destroyed everything because you just couldn't decide what was real and what wasn't. Notice I'm talking about this relationship in the past tense. It eventually destroys everything. But in one of his more lucid moments, he shared an incredibly deep insight with me that he'd learned experientially in his addiction. He said that when he first started, the cost was low and the pleasure was high. He's like, when I first started drugs, man, it's crazy the way he talked about it. Like, my life didn't change at all. I had to spend a little bit of money, I had to lie a little bit, but I also got to get high. So like, my life stayed the same and I added high. He's like, it was a win-win. This was awesome for me. And then as he went, these two things started to shift. And the cost started to go up, right? He had to lie a lot. It cost a lot more money. Some relationships started to crack, then crumble, then be dissolved into nothing. And the cost started going up. And at the same time, the drugs he was doing never quite got him back to that first high, that first great feeling he had. He had to take more drugs to even get close to it. And so this started to go down while the cost started to go up. And he said, he didn't notice, it wasn't some obvious shift, but it was slowly and imperceptibly over time. Eventually, he was in this place where the cost was crazy, and the pleasure actually was barely there at all, but it had a hold of him now. And it's the saddest thing in the world, because that's this little thing is what causes addiction, right? When it shifts, and the cost goes up, and the pleasure goes down, but it's got him by then. That formula destroys the addict's life. Now, we can look at that at the obvious addiction and say, yeah, I see that. But what I want you to see is that's true of anything that you're living your life for, anything that you're serving, anything that you've asked to fulfill you. This formula is true of anything. And I just give you a couple, again, obvious with drugs, obvious with alcohol. How about this? How about the person who lives for money? Do you know anybody like that who just live for money? And so for them, when they first started, the cost was low. Like, all right, they're putting in work, they're grinding it out, they're doing their thing, and they get money. And whatever amount they get, it does something in here. You're like, oh, it was awesome. I want more of that. So they search for more money, but the cost goes up. They have to, they can't come home as much. They got to work harder. Their relationships start to get strained. They have to start to lie and cheat and get after it at work and be a little more ruthless. And the cost starts going up, and the more money doesn't quite give them the same happiness. And the cost keeps going up, and the feeling that the more money gives them starts to drain. And eventually, a person who follows that to its logical conclusion is a very lonely millionaire, right? Who is not fulfilled, but they don't even enjoy the thing that they were asking to fulfill them. You could use anything as the example. Sports could be an example. A relationship could be an example. Food can be an example. What thing are you asking to fulfill you? What thing are you asking to fill that void in your soul? It probably started off working, and over time it stops working, and the cost of going after that thing really starts to wear on you. Anything in this category is going to do that to your soul. It's going to, at first it seems like it's going to work, and think about that. Relationships are such a great example. You know what the beginning of a relationship where everything's great, and it's, we call it the honeymoon stage, and it's the warm fuzzies. Oh my gosh, you're it. You're the one. You complete me. This is great. Everything, right? And then you fight a little bit, and then he doesn't understand you, she doesn't appreciate you, and all of a sudden you get here, the cost is high, and it's not giving you the same thing. Now, if you're like most people, you say, all right, well, this person isn't it. You throw them out, you try to find somebody else. New honeymoon stage, new warm fuzzy, and then it happens again, and then it happens again, and then it happens again. It doesn't work, because you're asking them to do something they can't do. The only thing that works with your heart, the way your heart is designed, the way it's wired, is that thing that fulfills you has to be God. He's the only one where this doesn't happen. God fits. All these things don't work for very long. Your heart was not designed to be satisfied them. Like drinking salt water and expecting it to quench your thirst, like running on a treadmill and expecting to get somewhere. It's not going to work. It'll feel like it's doing something, but it's not. Your heart was created to serve God. Your heart was created to be mastered by God. So the worst mistake you can make is to believe that your choice is between serving God or not serving God. That is a lie. That is not the real choice. If you're sitting on, I can choose to serve God or I can choose to serve nothing. Nope. The moment you choose not to serve God, your heart will pick a new thing to serve. And you don't get to pick whether or not you serve it. It will get a hold of you. But if you choose God, it's the thing your soul was created for. It'll click. So Joshua knows you're going to serve something. He puts the question, the choice to you. What are you going to serve? Who are you going to serve? And then he makes the declaration, right? As for me and my family, we will serve the Lord. And that's what I want to say to you. If you're over here and now that I've said it this way, and you're like, man, I am actually asking some things over here, fulfill me. And maybe you're somewhere in this shift where you're like, well, it was here, now it's here. It might not be here yet, but you can kind of feel it starting to do this. And you might be wondering, how can I get out of this? How can I not have something master me? Well, the mistake people make is, well, I got to stop serving that thing. I got to cut it off. The problem is your heart is wired to pick something. So even if you cut one thing off, it'll just pick another thing. You cut that thing off, it'll pick another thing. You'll just go from a thing to thing to thing. What you have to do in order to get out of that is choose God. God's the only thing that's going to solve this. So if you've maybe never started a relationship with God, you've never chosen to follow Jesus, what I'm telling you is the only way out of our addictive personality disorders that we are all born with, our hearts that will not be fulfilled by anything, is to choose God. Maybe today's the day you can choose to follow Jesus, choose to submit to him, surrender to him, allow him to be the master of your soul. I love the word renegade. The word renegade means one who treacherously changes allegiance. That's what you have to do. If you want to get out of over here, you have to choose to treacherously change your allegiance from anything in the world to God. And then also just want to real quick, briefly, maybe you're a Christian and you like officially, I serve God. Like this, God's it. You know, it's like that's your official stance. But let's be real. We slip over here sometimes, don't we? We ask some of these things to fulfill us, even though we know Jesus, even though we have a relationship with God. We detach our hearts and we start allowing our heart to try and find fulfillment in other things. But listen, you're free, Christian. You're free. That when Jesus died on the cross in your place for your sins, he allowed your heart to come back and connect over here to God. You are free. Why would you choose this? This is a cell that is locked from the inside. All you have to do is turn the key and walk out. He's right there. He's right there. Don't pick this life. Don't ask these things to fulfill you. They can't. They can't. You'll destroy yourself. You'll destroy whatever or whoever you're asking to fulfill you. Do not live over here. Get out. Come back to him. He's waiting. He's waiting. Choose God. Not anything else. Pray with me. Lord, I thank you for creating our hearts to be attached to you. It only really doesn't make sense when it's not attached to you, Lord. And I pray for the person who they've lived their whole life attached to other things. That's the water they've been swimming in. They don't know anything other than that. I pray that right now they'd see you. Open their eyes to see you right now. That a relationship with you could be the way out. Help them to choose you. And Lord, I pray for the Christian, somebody who's already chosen you, Lord. I pray that if they're over here stuck in some kind of serving something besides you, Lord, that they would see that it's locked from the inside, that you have freed them. You died on the cross for them. You already have chosen to have a relationship with them, Lord. I pray that they would come back to you. They would come running back to you. Cut those ties. Reattach the heart. Help them find their source in you. In Jesus' name I pray.